On today's show, we have Brennan Lamey, the founder of Kwil, a decentralized community-owned SQL database solution for data-intensive dApps and protocols. Why don't you give us an overview of what Kwil does?
Yeah, so super 10,000 foot view. Kwil, it's a decentralized SQL database. And so I guess just to really quickly break that down, as I'm sure a lot of listeners probably aren't too familiar with SQL databases. So when we're looking at, Web2 and, just like a traditional data storage, this is quite a bit of an oversimplification, but for the sake of the example, most data is stored in either file systems or databases. So, file systems, they function like a folder in your computer where, you can put files in, you can put files in different folders and then get them out if you know the name. And we have a lot of decentralized versions of this now. There's IPFS, and then, built on top of that for incentivization is Filecoin. There's Arweave as well, which is like, a permanent file system. But we're yet to see databases. And so how databases structure data in Web2, well, there's a variety of different databases, but the most common, somewhere between 60 and 70% of databases are called SQL, and they store data in tables. And so like the best way to sort of visualize it would be like an Excel spreadsheet. There's rows and there's columns, and different types of data lives within each of the columns. Like, you might have a username and then, or like a user ID, and then, a birth date, and then how many posts they have on a social media or something like that. And you can query by the data that's within those cells. And so it allows you to build much more data intensive and complex applications. And the language with which you query and sift through all that data is SQL, or it's pronounced SQL. So we are sort of taking this traditional database format that is very, very prevalent in Web2, and we're bringing it to Web3 so that now, one, it's much, much easier for developers to build data intensive apps and protocols in Web3. But two, they can build just much more complex. Like, it's not just like an ease of use thing. It expands the range of what was previously possible.
So currently, what do they have to do in Web3 that's kind of different than the traditional Web2?
So starting with social, this is just like a very, very basic example, but this has probably been our single largest point of traction so far, is decentralized social graphs. So, for example, let's say you're making a protocol where you can follow and unfollow people on this protocol. There is no way for you to build that in a truly decentralized way right now. Like, you can't make those follower relationships right now. But with Kwil, what you can do is you can define a table where you have a follower and who they're following. You can then set a function for who can interact with this and how they can. It's like very, very similar to a smart contract. And we're even looking at supporting Solidity for being able to do this. So it's very, very similar to a smart contract where you can just like deploy how people are able to interact with it. And then anybody can just permissionlessly, call it and plug into that database. Something like, Ethereum or any sort of like smart contract system, it could not support relationships like that. And then, something like Arweave or Filecoin, you could maybe support relationships like that, but the issue is that you can't query them. There's no way for you to go, all right, give me everybody that Joe is following, or give me everybody who follows Joe, right? There's no way for you to do that on Arweave, on Filecoin, on Ethereum, but you can do it in just a few word statement using SQL. And so it's really, really easy for you to pull that data, as opposed to right now, it's just not really possible.
Got it. And let's break down maybe one or two more great use cases that would relate to people's typical everyday activity that might be listening.
One of my personal favorite ones, and this is something that we are really trying to drive right now internally, but it's decentralized science. Are you familiar with like the replication crisis? So the replication crisis, it has to do with like research funding and how research funding is structured. So, researchers, they only get funding if they're doing novel research and new research, but critical to the scientific method is being able to reproduce results and, verify past results. And we're now finding out that a lot of studies that have been like pretty defining, that we've been relying on for even decades at this point, we're now finding out that when people try to replicate them, they fully can't. And it's based on almost faulty premises. But researchers are not incentivized to replicate studies. This is like one of the biggest things that decentralized science is trying to solve. But critical to decentralized science trying to solve that is having an open and composable way to store and query this data. So there's a project we're working with. They're still sort of like in a stealth mode, so I don't want to say their name.
Yeah.
But they're killing it right now. And they are solving exactly this, where they're trying to incentivize research replication, and they're using Kwil as that data storage layer so that researchers can permissionlessly publish, but then also replicate on studies that are on this platform. And then a third one, and this is like a bit less concerning for like, like an individual user, but it has like a lot of B2B applications, which is like decentralized analytics. Quite a few different projects we're working with right now. They're doing different types of decentralized analytics. Like there's one for consumer price index and like, tracking inflation for smart contracts. There's another one for like a generalized blockchain analytics. We're working with, a couple of these different firms now.
And you mentioned being in a couple of years. So who's driving this Kwil and, a little bit about your background and what kind of prompted the start of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I started developing it for fun. So I'm a college dropout. I'm the youngest member of the Kwil team.
Good, good.
Yeah, it started for me during COVID. So, my university went online, and so I took a gap year. I had like a, full-time internship, and I would just start developing this in my free time. And also, actually, it started as a decentralized social media built on top of Arweave. Just started developing it for fun, and then a couple angels, like, they offered, they were like, hey, we really like what you're doing. We'd love to do like an angel investment. And then, we started getting some traction on it. And really the niche we were finding, we'd sort of found our way into this, but it was like DAO communication, Discord for DAOs almost. And so that was really what we were originally building. And it was when we were talking to a DAO, they were building an NFT art gallery that, so we were trying to get them to use our social platform for their DAO communication. We were essentially competing with Discord in this. And, we're not going to win that fight. We didn't have as much money, as much resources, as much experience as Discord. We're not going to win that. But they were walking me through their stack and how their NFT art gallery worked. And I was really curious on how they stored their data. And they sort of walked me through it. And they told me that it was on AWS. And so I asked them, why haven't you looked at like things like Arweave or Filecoin? And it's because it didn't have like the data complexity, the data storage complexity, and the query complexity that they needed. They looked at it and it just didn't work for their solutions. And so I was like, well, we built this layer 2 on top of Arweave for our own social media. Would you guys be interested in trying this out? And that was the first time that QuilDB became a standalone product.
Awesome. And so how many members do you have of the team now?
Yeah, so the team is really small, so we're at 4 right now, but we just got off of a pretty large fundraise very, very recently. I mean, we are actually just getting the last of the money in the bank right now. And so we are scaling up. We're offering a position today. We're pretty sure I'll take it. So we'll hopefully be at 5 members after today. We're trying to scale up the team right now, but at the same time, make sure that we're not growing too fast. We're advised to raise for a 3-year run rate. And so that's what we're doing.
Have you guys announced your investors that have come into the recent round yet?
We haven't publicly announced it. It is on our informational site though, and so I mean you can go check it out there. But some of the highlights. So the round, it was co-led by Blockchain and then FTX. We had DCG in there. We had AliCorp, which the founder of MongoDB is also the founder of AliCorp. And so we have AliCorp in there. 7X is another one that's pretty large, as well as 3 different clients of Kwil are also in the round, and then some more strategic partners as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, right now, definitely got to have a runway for the next couple of years because we don't know what's going to happen in the market, right?
Yeah, very uncertain, very uncertain.
So is there any plans on the roadmap for a token of sort?
Yeah. So there will be a Kwil token. So we're in a test net right now. And so we haven't, publicly launched a Kwil token. It really just depends on when does it make the most sense for driving value to QuilDB and to the Kwil community for us to launch a token.
So what else is up next on the roadmap for the next 12 to 24 months? What are you guys trying to achieve?
Yeah, so we're launching what we call tables as a protocol. And so I guess for me to sort of explain this, it would help to draw parallels to Ethereum. And so, Ethereum, what you had was a platform where you could make your own ledger with its own programmable logic, its own special logic. You could deploy it, and now anybody can interact with this ledger as a protocol. And so we were taking that exact same idea, but we're taking it to SQL tables. So now you as a developer, you could structure your tables, define all the rows, the columns, the relationships. You can define all of that. You can then define, they're called parameterized queries, but essentially it's how people are able to interact with it. Like for example, the social media, follower example. You would define one where you have the person calling it and then who they want to follow. They would call that, and then it would create that follower relationship. But so we are creating, right now we're calling them smart DBs. I think we're going to change the name because it's too similar to smart contracts, where they can just deploy the table as a protocol, and now anybody can permissionlessly plug into it. So essentially the same thing that Ethereum brought to ledgers, but bringing it to SQL, SQL tables. So that's, I think, the very first thing on our roadmap. That's the thing that we spend all day developing right now. And we're looking at a test implementation of that, I'm hoping in 3 weeks. And then moving a bit farther from that is what's called multi-model databases. So right now we are SQL databases, but there are other types of databases. There's NoSQL databases, there's graph databases, document databases. And at its core, Kwil is a data synchronicity protocol. Whether it's a SQL database or a graph database or a document database, it doesn't really matter to the protocol itself. And so expanding on what can be built on Kwil by expanding Kwil itself. So, it no longer being a SQL database, but also being a graph database, also being document based. And so that, I would say, after tables as a protocol, that's the next thing on our roadmap. And it's also the second most requested feature we have by customers.
What website, Twitter, where?
Yeah, so Twitter, it's Kwil Team, KWIL Team. Our website's kwil.com, just KWIL.com. Pretty easy to find. I'm Brennan Lamey on Twitter. You can also just DM me on there, and I'll hopefully respond pretty quickly. Kwil.com is probably the easiest way. We have all of our contact info in there, Discord, Twitter, email, stuff like that.